Viewers, I'm Squadron Leader Peter Allen, Officer in charge of the Royal Australian Air Force Museum at Point Cook. Welcome to the museum's first venture into video presentation of the technical detail and operation of some of the significant aircraft in the history of Australian aviation. Australia first became involved in military aviation in 1913 when Point Cook in Victoria was selected as the site for establishment of the first military airfield in the country. Since the commencement of the first course in August 1914 at Point Cook, with 4 trainee pilots on Deperdussin and Boxkite aircraft, and the Australian Flying Corps commitment during World War I, the Royal Australian Air Force has developed into a highly mobile, professional and flexible force, utilising state-of-the-art technology. The evolution of today's Air Force, however, has not been a simple process, and the experience of operation and support of many significant aircraft throughout the Force's relatively short history has contributed to the structure, traditions and heritage of the Royal Australian Air Force today. The RAAF Museum at Point Cook was founded in 1952 under the direction of Air Marshal Sir George Jones, the then Chief of Air Staff, to preserve and display the heritage and traditions of the RAAF as they have already and will develop. The museum at Point Cook has developed over recent years a fine collection of aircraft, technical data, weaponry, uniforms, photographs and other memorabilia significant to the history of the RAAF. Only in the more recent years has the RAAF Museum become conscious of its very real responsibility to bring to the public in many different ways the history of the Royal Australian Air Force. More recent initiatives include promotion of its existence through tourist authorities, museum flying participation whenever appropriate in air displays, and provision of static displays at various centres and displays throughout the country. The detail which can be presented through the displays has been necessarily limited and has clearly not satisfied the enthusiast, particularly those seeking precise detail on military aircraft which have been operated by the RAAF Museum. RAAF Museum participation in this video series provides the opportunity to present an exciting and factual account of the Air Force's operation of aircraft selected as being particularly significant to the development and operation of the Air Force.
When the time came to plan a replacement for the Gloucester Meteor fighters of the RAAF in 1950, the question of British or American aircraft was investigated. The most suitable type appeared to be the Hawker P-1081, a swept-wing development of the Seahawk, but for various reasons the North American F-86 Sabre was finally chosen for production under licence by Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation Proprietary Limited. Project designs for a high-performance subsonic jet fighter for the United States Air Force had been laid out by North American Aviation during 1944, alongside plans for a similar carrier-based fighter for the United States Navy. The Navy craft, known as NA-134, resulted eventually in the FJ-1 Fury, and the Air Force version was known as NA-140 or XP-86. A mock-up of the XP-86 was approved by the United States Air Force in June 1945, But as the estimated performance showed little advantage over the Republic P-84, which was already committed to production, the North American aviation engineers began an intensive study on the German data becoming available at the end of the Second World War, to see whether the application of a sweepback would be advantageous. Wind tunnel testing in September 1945 was so encouraging that North American Aviation submitted a revised swept-wing and swept-tail version of the XP-86 to the United States Air Force, and this proposal was boldly accepted on the 1st of November 1945, thus establishing America's first swept-wing jet fighter firmly in development. A key feature of the design was the application of an automatic leading edge flap, which would open at low speeds to improve stability at low speeds, but would close at high speeds to allow full advantage to be taken of the swept-back mainplane and tail surfaces. The first prototypes flew at Muroc, now Edwards Air Force Base, on the 1st of October 1947, and in the course of a highly successful test flight program, Mach 1 was exceeded during a shallow dive. Thus, the XP-86 was the second American airplane and the first American combat aircraft to go supersonic. It demonstrated a top speed of 618 miles per hour in level flight at 14,000 feet, flying at a takeoff weight of 13,790 pounds. A month after the first production P-86A flew, the United States Air Force changed its fighter designation from P to F, so henceforth the North American fighter was the F-86. It was not until March 1949, after it had entered squadron service, that it was named Sabre. The American F-86 Sabre was powered by the 4,850-pound static thrust General Electric J-47 GE-1 engine and carried an armament of 6 half-inch machine guns, 3 each side in the nose intake walls. During 1950, air warfare in Korea proved the United States Air Force operated Sabre to be superior to its Soviet-built contemporary, the MiG-15. But when selecting their replacements, the RAAF had to ensure, for economic reasons, that its new equipment would remain effective well into the 1960s. The decision was taken, therefore, to fit a Rolls-Royce Avon RA7 turbojet engine of 7,500 pounds static thrust in place of the General Electric J-47. This installation of another engine brought its problems. The Avon required about 25% more airflow than the J-47, and this entailed deepening the nose air intake by 3.5 inches. Although of higher power, the Avon was 400 pounds lighter than the American engine, and had to be mounted further aft in the fuselage to maintain the centre of gravity in the correct position, which necessitated repositioning the brake point at which the rear fuselage was removed for engine servicing. 100 sets of the F-86F major structural components were ordered from North American Aviation to speed production, but CAC had to redesign some 60% of the airframe. The cockpit layout was revised, fuel capacity increased, and heavier armament was installed. The half-inch guns as used by the United States Air Force, or the then standard British armament of 420mm cannon, were not desired by the RAAF, and all Avon Sabres were delivered with 2 30mm Aden guns. With these changes, the Australian Sabre became the most outstanding member of the Sabre family. The prototype CA-26 Avon Sabre A94-101 flew first on the 3rd of August 1953. This was powered by an imported Rolls-Royce Avon, and the first production CA-27 A94-901, which followed on July 13, 1954, was similarly powered. Subsequent aircraft had engines built under licence by CAC. The initial series of 21 aircraft, A94-901 to 921, were first fitted with RA7 engines assembled from imported components and standard F-86F wings. These were called Mark 30, and following service trials delivered to No. 3 Squadron RAAF on March 1, 1956. The wings were fitted with the leading edge slats which gave good handling characteristics at low speeds, but created considerable drag in high-speed flight. The United States Air Force modified its F-86Fs in Korea in 1952 to obtain higher performance by replacing the slats with an extended leading edge, known as the 6-3 extension, as it increased the wing chord by 6 inches at the root and 3 inches at the tip. The area was increased from 287.9 to 302.3 square feet, and a small fence was added at 70% span on each wing. When fitted to the F-86F, the 6-3 wing gave 7 miles per hour increase in top speed, longer range, and improved the manoeuvrability at high altitudes. This modified Sabre was able to outperform the MiG-15, the Soviet counterpart. These improvements were obtained at the cost of higher stalling and landing speeds, but were well worthwhile, and all Avon Sabres had their slats replaced by the 6-3 wings in 1957 and 58. They were redesignated Mark 31 and were supplemented by 20 new Mark 31s, A94 923 to 942, with CAC built Avon 20 engines. Two of the new aircraft, A94 938 and 942, had extra fuel tankage in their wing leading edges, giving a total fuel capacity of 422 gallons instead of the normal 352 gallons. When a pair of 100 or 167 gallon underwing drop tanks were also carried, this gave the Avon Sabre an unusually good range, and the leading edge tanks became standard on the final Mark 32 version. 69 Mark 32 were built, 943 to 990 and 351 to 371, with Avon 26 engines and attachments for 4 instead of 2 underwing fuel tanks, 2 1,000-pound bombs, or 24 3-inch air-to-surface rockets. The additional attachment points necessitated reduction in the capacity of the leading-edge tanks to 60 gallons of fuel. The Avon Sabre showed its paces in combat operations against terrorists in Malaya, for No. 3 Squadron transferred to Butterworth in October 1958 and was subsequently joined by No. 77 Squadron. Both were in Malaya, forming part of the British Commonwealth Strategic Reserve in the Far East. Numbers 75 and 76 Avon Sabre squadrons remained in Australia. A fifth, No. 79 Squadron, was formed in May 1962 to strengthen SEATO forces in Thailand. To maintain the effectiveness of the Sabre pending introduction of a replacement fighter, the armament was supplemented with air-to-air missiles from 1960. Firing trials had been made on Mark 31 aircraft with the British Firestreak missile with the fire control equipment contained in an under-fuselage pack, but the small, simple American Sidewinder infrared homing missile was chosen as operational armament. Avon Sabres of the 2 Malaysia-based squadrons were the first to be fitted with Sidewinders in February 1960. All Mark 32 aircraft were equipped to carry these weapons, and earlier Marks were modified to accommodate them. Within the Sabre, various parts and systems are of interest to the enthusiast. We'll take a look at some, beginning with the engine starting system. The Sabre is started using the Plessey LT SA70 liquid fuel starter, which is essentially a combustion chamber with connections at one end for the admittance of fuel and air, and 4 convergent nozzles at the other end, which direct the gases onto the turbine blades, which in turn drive the output shaft through a planetary reduction gear. Once a power supply is connected, pressing the starter button causes the air from the blower to cleanse the chamber for 2 to 3 seconds, removing fumes and ensuring that the fuel-air conditions are suitable for ignition. After the scavenging, a time switch allows fuel to enter the chamber through an atomizer head, where it mixes with the air to form a combustible mixture. The ignition switch is operated by the rise in pressure in the fuel feed line, and 2 igniters in the chamber are energized. Under normal conditions, the isopropyl nitrate fuel used for the starter has an inflammability comparable to methylated spirits, and is therefore classed as a safe fuel. But in the combustion chamber, the ignited fuel-air mixture increases the pressure and temperature, and as the decomposed gases expand, the airflow is cut off, while the fuel flow is maintained, and the gases pass through the nozzle plate to drive the small turbine. This reaches a peak of 55,000 revs per minute and 150 brake horsepower. Once it reaches 12,000 revs per minute on the output shaft, the whole starter system is automatically shut down, and this is usually about 7 seconds after the initial pressing of the starter button. The Sabre fuel system. The main fuel system consists of 4 self-sealing tanks, 2 in the fuselage and 1 in each outer wing panel, all connected to the forward fuselage lower cell through a gravity feed setup, and as the system functions as a single source of fuel, no means of tank selection is necessary. In the Mark 31 aircraft, 2 fuel tanks are incorporated in each main plane, and provision is made for fitting either a 100 or 167 gallon drop tank under each wing. In the Mark 32, the fuel system is similar, except that it has 3 tanks incorporated in each main plane leading edge, and provision is made for 100 gallon drop tanks to be carried at the inboard stations, and 167 or 100 gallon drop tanks to be carried at the outboard station on each wing. The disc-type hydraulic wheel brakes are conventionally operated by toe action on rudder pedals, in which the hydraulic boosting occurs at a foot pressure of over 20 psi. Hydraulically operated speed brakes are located on each side of the fuselage, below the dorsal fin. Each speed brake consists of a panel hinged at the forward edge, and the panel, when open, extends down and forward into the airstream. Pressure for normal operation of the speed brakes is supplied by the utility hydraulic system. Opening time is approximately 2 seconds, whilst closing time is up to 7 seconds, depending on indicated airspeed. And there is no speed brake position indicator. The electrically operated sliding canopy may be controlled from either inside or outside the aircraft, but it may also be operated manually. There's a seal which inflates whenever the canopy is fully closed and the engine is operating. When the canopy switch is actuated, and as an automatic procedure before canopy ejection, the seal deflates to allow the canopy to move. 2 spring-loaded push buttons located on either side of the fuselage operate the canopy by depressing them accordingly. The ejection seat system permits ejection at any speed or flight attitude by means of an explosive cartridge-type catapult mounted behind the seat. Automatic seat separation occurs at the same time as the lap belt is opened, thus saving time and increasing chances of survival during very low-level ejection. Major components of the system include the canopy breaker, the seat guide rails, the explosively charged M5 catapult and M3 initiators, the automatic opening lap belt, M12 initiator and tele-rotary actuator, the shoulder harness and inertia reel. When the seat is ejected, anti-G suit, oxygen hose, microphone and headset connections are automatically disconnected at a fitting attached to the seat between the footrests. The ejection levers, normally locked in the down position by wire, are shaped to take the pilot's finger and hinged to the front of each armrest. They provide the dual functions of canopy breaker and seat ejector. During level flight or climbing, if the lanyard assembly snap hook is connected to the parachute ripcord and all other conditions are favourable, it is possible to eject as low as 100 feet above ground level at a minimum of indicated airspeed 140 knots. But at this altitude, there is absolutely no margin for error. In fact, the chances of a successful ejection is reduced accordingly as the altitude is reduced below 2,000 feet. Flying characteristics of the Sabre. The handling characteristics and stalling qualities at low speed are very good. Except for a higher required angle of attack during takeoff and landing, which is characteristic of swept-wing aircraft, no outstanding differences between this aircraft and a standard straight-wing fighter will be noticed in slow flight, and the flying controls are effective right down to the stall. Stability and control in high-speed flight are unaffected by compressibility until Mach number approaches 0.9. Above this speed, it will be found that control column movements required to manoeuvre the aircraft are larger than those required at lower Mach numbers, but ample control is always available. Control of the aircraft in the pitching plane is achieved with an all-moving, irreversible, hydraulically powered tailplane. This system gives the same control as more conventional systems at low speeds, and at high speeds it is superior, because it has the power to produce large control deflections without great physical effort by the pilot. The Sabre is aerodynamically a clean aircraft, and it is heavy. Consequently, it accelerates rapidly in a dive, even with the power off. The result is that a lot of height is required when recovering from a high-speed dive. Pilots should not execute steep, high-speed dives at low altitude until they are familiar with the effects of airspeed, dive angle, and pull-out G on the height lost in recovery. Rudder control. The conventional cable-operated rudder provides directional control during takeoff and landing and during low-speed flight. At higher speeds in symmetric flight conditions, little use of rudder is required. When asymmetric external loads are carried, coordinated use of rudder is required to ensure balanced flight. Flaps. The flaps are optimized for maximum lift, hence only one position is provided, which is used for both takeoff and landing. This means that approach angles are relatively shallow. Armament description. The basic armament consists of two 30mm Aden guns mounted in the fuselage and two Sidewinder missiles, one on each wing. For ground attack operations, varying loads of bombs, rockets and tanks can be carried under the wings. A gyro reflector sight and radar ranging are provided for armament sighting. In addition, a camera is mounted on the sight head, or in the nose, to record weapons results. The two Aden guns are gas-operated, belt-fed, and fully automatic once loaded. The ammunition for each gun is contained in a bin below each gun bay. Red cloth is seen in the gun bay kickstep when the gun is loaded. Although the gun firing is an electrical function, the guns must be charged pneumatically on the ground when the ammunition is installed. And if gun stoppage occurs in the air, it usually cannot be cleared until manual clearing is accomplished on the ground. The gun muzzles are capped with plastic plugs, which are blown off when the guns begin firing their load of up to 162 rounds per gun. The rate of fire is 1200 to 1400 rounds per minute. Muzzle velocity is 2600 fps. Ammunition is HE or ball. And gravity drop is approximately 3 feet at 1000 feet and 13 feet at 2000 feet range. Two Sidewinder infrared air-to-air guided missiles may be fitted, one under each wing, to a detachable pylon launcher combination immediately forward of the undercarriage hinge points. When firing the missiles, fuel dipping is necessary to avoid possible engine surge or flameout caused by ingested missile blast at high altitude, high engine RPM, and low indicated airspeed. Fuel dipping is initiated by depressing the bomb rocket release button on the control column and functions for 1 to 5 seconds during the critical period of missile launching. The Sabre is equipped with a Type A 4A automatic lead and ballistic computing sight located above and forward of the instrument panel shroud. The sight reticle image is a centre dot with an outer circle composed of 10 equally spaced diamond-shaped dots. Range data for gunnery operation may be inserted by the pilot or supplied to the sight by the AN/APG-56 radar equipment, which automatically locks onto and tracks a target and provides an indication when the lock-on has been accomplished. The radar range is 600 to 24,000 feet at an altitude up to 60,000 feet. The AN/ARC-34B UHF command radio is located through an access door behind the nose wheel well, whilst the control panel is situated on the instrument panel and the antenna is suppressed into the upper tail fin. The radio operates via 1,750 channels, of which 20 are preset on the ground. A removable MA-4A bomb rack can be installed on the lower surface of each outer wing panel. Mark 32 aircraft are equipped with 4 external load stations. However, only the inboard stations may be used for bombs. Each bomb rack will carry single bombs from 100 to 1,000 pounds, bomb clusters up to 500 pound size, a tank, or one fragmentation bomb rack assembly. 2 napalm tanks can be carried on standard MA4A carriers. Release switch selections are the same as for demolition bombs. A total of 24 on the Mark 31 or 30 on the Mark 32 British 3-inch No. 1 Mark 5 rockets may be carried. The rockets are supported in tiers of 3 from Mark 12 Type 4B launchers, which in turn are installed in the normal zero-rail launchers. A low-pressure oxygen system is supplied from 4 Type D2 cylinders, installed in the nose section, and includes a pressure demand regulator, a flow indicator, and a pressure gauge. For combat safety, check valves are incorporated in the system to prevent total loss of oxygen in the event of a system failure or cylinder rupture. The pressure demand regulator is mounted on the front of the left forward console. It supplies the proper mixture of oxygen and air at all times, automatically supplying positive pressure breathing at high altitudes. Regardless of how much oxygen is being used, the pressure will always be correct for any specific high altitude. The system may be used up to 48,000 feet. However, operations at cockpit altitudes of above 42,000 feet have the following limits. For brief periods only up to 45,000 feet, 15 minutes up to 44,000 feet, and 30 minutes up to 43,000 feet. Now let's look at some archival footage on the conversion course to the Sabre, and we'll also listen to the original narrator.
At Williamtown 2 is the Sabre conversion unit. Here, jet pilots are trained to fly this single-seat fighter with its complex powered controls. They are also introduced to a new flying requirement, the G-suit. As an aircraft pulls out of a steep dive or makes tight turns, the gravitational forces increase many times. This causes the body fluids to flow to the extremities, starving the brain of blood and causing blackouts. The pressure or G-suit, which the medical officer fits to the pilot, is designed to check this flow by inflating as the G-force increases. At the same time, he is fitted with his special parachute and survival gear. The practical side of Sabre conversion begins at the Sabre simulator. Here, in a maze of electronic controls, the designers have managed to build in the sound and feel of Sabre flying, with all the things that can go wrong, too. Should the trainee crash the simulator, the power goes off and the lights go out. The accident can then be reconstructed to show cause and effect. The trainee is put through all the necessary steps to get the simulator into the air by the instructor, who has a duplicate set of flight instruments.
Okay, now your call sign is Tiger 82. You're in the cockpit, you're strapped in, your power's on, and you're fit to start.
Okay.
Your startup was quite normal. Tiger 82, this is Willie Tower. You're clear for takeoff.
Okay.
Get the throttle over nice and smooth. 90 knots coming up. Smoothly back on the stick. Get your gear up. You've passed your gear speed already. Gear up, get your flap up. Flap, you're too fast. Pull the nose back. Further back, further back. Not too much, not too harsh. Look, you're approaching your stall. Watch it, watch it. Oh, you've stalled it.
Sorry, sir.
Cut out the sorry, sir. Get the nose down. Get the nose down now. That's better. Get your wings level. Good boy. How do you feel, 82?
I'm all right now, I think.
Okay, I think we'll get you back on the ground again now, and we'll run through the takeoff again. Get everything squared away and turn to a heading of 120.
120, I think.
82, what's your undercarriage speed?
185 knots.
Okay, get ready for your gear. There's your gear down now.
Gear down and lock, sir.
Right, turn around now on the final. On the final turn of the base leg, 160 knots minimum. Get your flap out. Watch your bank. Too much the other way, 82. Watch your altitude, watch your speed. 140, 130, 120, watch your bank. 60 degrees of bank, watch it, 82. You're rolling. You're inverted, 82. 300 feet. 300, 200, 100 feet. Too late, 82. You're dead. If you did that in the air, boy, you'd be wearing wings on your shoulders instead of your chest.
For the trainee, the Sabre is the first aircraft with a steerable nose wheel, so he spends part of his ground training learning to taxi. A Sabre is taxied by building up the jet thrust against the brakes and then letting go, with the steerable nose wheel to help get around corners. With all this power, the trainee could clean up the tarmac, so the instructor rides on the wing to help him in case of trouble. As the instructor cannot fly with him, he flies behind in another Sabre. In this way, he can observe any tendency to force the powered controls. Movement of the Sabre control column merely opens valves which allow hydraulic pressure to move the control surfaces. Over-controlling is therefore an understandable error in pilots used to the range of movement of manual control.
Very smoothly on the throttle, 82. Quite nice. Get the nose wheel off. Just relax now. Be careful. Watch it. There it goes. That's your own induced oscillation. Hold it there. Remember, you've got powered controls for the first time. Just put into a gentle turn. That's good. That's good. Now, very smoothly, just stay with it. Watch it. There it goes again. You're inducing it yourself. Remember, very, very gentle on these controls. The fully powered controls. Very careful. That's it. A lot smoother now. Very good. That's it. You've got the hang of it now. We're turning on the final. You've got 150, 140, 135. Looks good. Mobile control. You've got him mobile. He's got 135 knots. Chase taking it round.
Another Sabre pilot safely launched, and the instructor rolls to celebrate.
We're here with Flight Lieutenant Wayne Higginbottom. Wayne, you fly the Sabre. What's it like as an aircraft to fly?
Well, it's a lovely little aeroplane to fly. It's fairly old, it's 30 years of age, but it's very similar to Mirage in a lot of aspects, and the F-18 Hornet in others. It's probably got some good qualities and some bad qualities, but generally speaking, it's a nice little aeroplane to fly. It's limited in what you can do with it, primarily because we're trying to preserve it and hopefully keep it flying for the next 10 years.
I believe you fly Mirages.
That's correct. With the 77 Squadron and flying Mirages with them on the ops side. Been doing that for about 15 years.
Right. Now you run the Sabre basically for air shows and various things like that.
It's just for air shows and special occasions such as fighter pilot reunions at Williamtown.
Right.
We don't do a lot of air shows. It's limited in hours. It only has 50 hours a year. But primarily, we've been lucky this year. We've had quite a few air shows to play around with.
Yeah. It's a nice, clean aircraft. It must be a pleasure to fly.
It's a lovely aeroplane. It's been well prepared by 2AD at Richmond. We originally came from the Malaysians, although we had it first off, but 2AD at Richmond spent about 11,000 hours fixing the aeroplane.
Right.
Put a lot of time and effort, a lot of their own time and effort in the aeroplane, and it's the only one in the world flying with the Avon engine in it.
Well, it's quite a clean aircraft. Do you ever put any underwing stores on it?
Only the tanks. We bought the 167-gallon tanks over here from Richmond, primarily because if we didn't have them, we'd probably fall short by about 500 miles. But that's all that's ever put on it. It's the tanks. We sometimes do the shows with the sidewinders on it, but because of the drag penalty we would pay bringing them over, we'd run out of fuel.
Yeah, exactly.
To be on the safe side, we took them off.
Now, is this a Mark II or a Mark I version?
Mark II.
Mark II. So it can, in fact, have 4 drop tanks.
It can have 4 drop tanks. However, you suffer a drag penalty, and ideally with the other little drop tanks, 100-gallon drop tanks, the idea is to jettison and then get your range that way by using that fuel from 100-gallon drop tanks.
Yeah.
If you were to retain them, you would lose, you wouldn't get any further range out of the aircraft, and you'd just suffer the extra drag penalty for no reason at all.
Right. Okay. Well, how many more years do you expect to fly this aircraft?
Well, I'll be finishing flying the Sabre at the end of the year. In fact, I'm posted to a ground job in Canberra, and I'm handing over to another guy probably at this rate, probably around about April, May next year. And hopefully when they change the engine, it'll be all okay and ready to roll again.
Right. And the life of the aircraft?
Well, the life of the aircraft is determined by fatigue factors. Has a fatigue meter in it. It's limited to 4G, -1. I don't see it probably having any great effect for at least another 5 years, so hopefully we'll be around for that period of time.
Right. What will happen to it after that?
I think probably it'll go in the museum somewhere, possibly the Fighter Pilot Museum as the last flying Sabre.
Yeah.
However, I hope that's a long way off and we don't have to worry about it.
Yes, we certainly hope so.
Yeah.
Fine. Thank you very much, Wayne.
Okay, thank you.
High over Malaya, pilots of Sabre jet fighters of the Royal Australian Air Force continue their training. They operate there as part of the air component of the Commonwealth Strategic Reserve. These young pilots are among nearly 1,000 Australian airmen who make up the strength of the RAAF base at Butterworth in northern Malaya. But before these Sabre fighters could be operated in Malaya, they had to be flown from their Australian base over 6,000 miles away. This then is the story of Operation Sabre Ferry. It is the story of how the RAAF successfully carried out its greatest ferry flight since the end of the war. Before the Sabres left Australia, the squadrons were inspected by many important visitors, including the Minister for Air, the Honourable F.M. Osborne. Within the service itself, the plans and preparations for the flight were watched with keen interest by all concerned. Two famous units of the RAAF, number 3 Squadron and number 77 Squadron, were to make the long ferry flight from their bases on the east coast of Australia. The staging points were at Townsville, Darwin, Netherlands, New Guinea, the Philippines and Borneo. While such a long and exacting flight was nothing unusual for the few senior officers taking part, for the younger pilots it was a thrilling experience, as it was their first flight outside their homeland. The whole operation was planned as a routine training exercise, however, and without undue ceremony, the takeoffs got underway. Number 77 Squadron took off from Richmond, while number 3 Squadron had earlier taken off from Williamtown. 4 aircraft operated together, each group of 4 following close upon the other. Both squadrons made an overnight stop at Townsville, and the last contact with the homeland was at Darwin, where some old Australians showed a happy interest in the air activities of these young Australians. At Darwin, the RAAF is going ahead with the building of a new strip, which will make it one of the largest in Australia and capable of accommodating aircraft from anywhere in the world. So for the RAAF members working at Darwin, it was nothing unusual to find themselves hosts to a long succession of fighter aircraft and their pilots. The ground servicing parties quickly had the Sabres marshalled and inspected in readiness for the next flight. After a brief rest, the Sabre pilots took off again on the long hop to Netherlands, New Guinea. From Biak, 1,000 miles from Darwin, they flew to the Philippines, where they used the old Guiwan strip. Here, all the ground facilities, fuel and personnel had to be air freighted in advance. As in all places, the locals in the Philippines showed their interest in Operation Sabre Ferry. In addition to those who had jobs to do, whether in handling the aircraft or in carrying for the crews, there was always the wide-eyed small boy who looked and wondered at the visitors and their equipment. The American and Netherlands governments, as well as many Australian departments, such as civil aviation, were quick to provide assistance whenever a request was made. They aided the RAAF ground parties by the provision at some locations of oxygen supplies and firefighting facilities, and with assistance in refueling where necessary. The local servicemen were always interested observers. Operation Sabre Ferry was the most important air movement of the RAAF outside Australia since the end of the Second World War. Flight planning in such an operation was of extreme importance. To aid pilots taking part, Neptune and Canberra aircraft carried out weather reconnaissance flights and provided aerial radio beacons. Dakota and Hercules transport aircraft flew special RAAF ground parties to all landing areas, where they were on hand throughout the exercise to assist in the operation of control tower duties. In addition to the RAAF aircraft providing search and rescue cover, which fortunately was not needed, aircraft such as these of the United States Air Force also assisted in sea patrols. And so Operation Sabre Ferry continued. From the Philippines, the Sabres flew a further 1,000 miles to Borneo, until against the outline of the radar of the RAAF already operating at Butterworth, the Sabres, 4 at a time, came winging in to make their Malayan touchdown. Operation Sabre Ferry had been a big job, with many sections of the RAAF playing a part. It was a big job, but it proved a job well done.
Right, we're here with Tom Lloyd from 2AD and we'd like to talk about the Sabre. Tom, what's your job to do with the Sabre?
On this particular trip I'm the NCO in charge, but mainly back at 2AD I handle the instrumentation side and the oxygen side of the aircraft.
Right, and the Australian Sabre is completely different from the American Sabre.
Yes, we installed a Avon engine in our Sabres, which facilitated modding the aircraft to fit the particular engine.
Right, and this involved changing the whole of the fuselage breakdown in the wing, didn't it?
Yes, yeah, major modification of that. The Sabre never saw any wartime action. It came out a little bit too late for Korea, and then was phased out before Vietnam. Was never used up there, so mainly it's just been used as fighter squadrons in Australia. Went up to Ubon in Thailand as part of the peace force up there, and was used in Malaya as well as a deterrent for communists.
thank you. And where have you been in service with it? Just in 2AD in Australia, or have you chased it around?
With the Sabre, when I was a mechanic many years ago, 1970-71, I did about 6 months on Sabres. Then they phased out, and only since I've been back at the D2AD that I've actually been working back on this particular Sabre.
Mm-hmm. What do you particularly like about the Sabre as an aircraft, and what do you dislike?
Oh, the particular like is the engine. It's the Rolls-Royce Avon engine, and it has a beautiful sound when it flies through the air. Dislikes. Equipment inside the aircraft is very hard to get at, but apart from that, it's a beautiful little aircraft to work on.
The aircraft's due to have the engine removed at the end of November. The engine that's in it is out of hours for the seals, and we're going to replace the whole engine, and hopefully the engine that we're going to put in, even though it has been fully overhauled, will be serviceable. There's a little bit of doubt about the seals that are in it because they're out of shelf life as well. Since I've worked with the aircraft, I've enjoyed myself immensely, and I believe that it's an aircraft that only people who enjoy the aircraft would enjoy working on. It's an aircraft that you couldn't tell somebody to do something on, they'd have to want to do it. The difference between the servicings then and the servicings now, you'd have to be able to make up your own mind on how the servicing should be done and if it's done correctly. But it's a very enjoyable aircraft to go away with. It's beautiful to watch to fly, and it's exceptionally quiet compared to our modern aircraft, which will just about split your eardrums when they go over. The only drawback with this aircraft, because there's 8 people who work on it nearly all the time, is that it's only got one seat, and it's only the pilot who enjoys flying it. We only allowed to enjoy watching it.
we can find the Canberra ground crews busy around the Australian. In the Far East and was built by Australian airfield construction workers a few years ago. Quickly the takeoffs get underway and ceaselessly the radar eyes keep watch on any aircraft operating in the area. Like the side of a house, but the young Australian pilots know it's a very different proposition when you're approaching a target at a speed of 400 to 500 miles an hour. Everybody gets a thrill out of fireworks, but it's a different sort of thrill when Sabre rocketry takes place. High skill and proficiency are essential with a rocket weighing 60 pounds. The target is a small floating marker, and the Sabre fighter is rocketing downwards in a screaming dive.
remains of the Royal Australian Air Force have made their mark. On June the 1st, 1962, number 79 Squadron flew from Singapore to this small airfield in Thailand. Australia had been quick to respond to a Southeast Asia Treaty Organization request for forces to be stationed in Thailand when that country appealed for assistance. During the Second World War, number 79 Fighter Squadron operated from Pacific Island bases. The squadron was disbanded in November 1945, but was reformed in Singapore in May 1962 when the SEATO appeal was made. Equipped with Australian-built Sabre jet fighters, the squadron was in Thailand within a matter of days. At Yubon, the squadron settled into work without fuss or bother. This routine was nothing new to the Australians. Extensive squadron mobility training was paying dividends. And after all, the RAAF had gone into action 2 days after the Korean War opened. The Australian Sabre carries a big punch, the Sidewinder air-to-air missile. When released, this weapon homes onto its target with deadly accuracy. There was a difference to the armourer's work in Yubon, however. These Sidewinders were for real. They were not practice missiles. And the ammunition being loaded into the Aden guns also had a more lethal air than practice rounds. To become operational at Yubon, the RAAF literally started from scratch. Everything had to be flown in by air. The Australian Hercules transport aircraft were the key to this side of the work, and during the first 10 days of the occupation, Hercules aircraft carried more than 100 tons of supplies and equipment into Yubon. As well, all ground personnel were flown in by service aircraft. Maintenance was carried out in the open, and there was nothing unusual in briefings and plannings carried out in the open air. Whether on mobility exercises anywhere in the SEATO area, in Australia or in Malaya, the Sabre drill is the same. Aircraft have to be checked before takeoff. Flying equipment and safety gear have to be in readiness. This time the takeoffs were against a background of tents and bare airfield, but it wasn't long before permanent workshops and huts replaced the tents, and nearly all of it was to be brought in by the hard-working Hercules. Teamwork and administration didn't miss a beat. The pay parade, whether at home or overseas, is always a welcome break, and Yubon is no exception. Sortie over, the Sabre pilots return to the crew tent, while the aircraft flight records are kept in order at an open-air office table, just as efficiently as in a flight room back home. Back at the airfield, however, the work goes on. Patrols continue. And so number 79 Squadron is playing its part in the peacetime role of the Royal Australian Air Force.
For a Sabre pilot going out on a sortie, his position is extremely demanding on his skills and talents. Not only does he have to fly a complex aircraft, but as he has no crew, he must cope with the intricacy of the cockpit instruments, navigation, communication, and any flight variations. It is his job, and his alone, to make a successful strike whilst avoiding all possible hazards. A quick look around a Sabre cockpit will give you some indication of the job in hand. As CA-27 Avon Sabre A94-983 is the last flying Avon Sabre in the world, let's have a look at some of its history. 983 was built in Melbourne, Victoria at CAC Fisherman Bend plant. It had its maiden flight in November 1957 and was handed over to the RAAF for squadron service. Following the introduction of the Mirage in 1964, Sabre aircraft were gradually phased out of the RAAF. Subsequently, in 1970, the Australian government supplied Malaysia with 16 Sabres under a foreign aid program. One of the aircraft was 983, which continued to fly as FM 1983 in the colours of the Royal Malaysian Air Force until 1976, when it was grounded to await breaking up. In 1977, No. 75 Squadron RAAF, then operating Mirages at Airbase Butterworth, Malaysia, was able to save 983 from the wreckers. And 12 months later, despite many difficulties, an e-servicing, which is a major overhaul of the aircraft, was completed. It was a proud day when on the 7th of July 1978 the commanding officer of the squadron, Wing Commander Mick Parra, put the aircraft through a most successful air test. A large crowd at the base waited to cheer her to a safe landing. The aircraft was officially handed back to the RAAF by Malaysia, and it was dismantled and flown back to Australia in a C-130 Hercules aircraft. No. 2AD at Richmond then began a full restoration program to bring 983 back to its original condition. Avon Sabres were used by No. 3 Squadron, No. 75 Squadron, No. 76 Squadron, No. 77 Squadron, No. 79 Squadron, 2OCU, 5OTU, and Aircraft Research and Development Unit at Edinburgh, South Australia. The Avon Sabre was replaced as the frontline fighter for the RAAF by the Mirage, which at the time of completing this film in December 1986 is in the process of being decommissioned and replaced in turn by the FA-18 Hornet.